الحمد لله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. So, a lot of our life is spent determining, what is and what is not. We don't really always consider like what just can be. We usually put things into one of two slots: what is or what isn't. And when we're younger, we think more about like what can be. And as we get older, we don't think so much about what can be, but we think about what is and what is not. And we get a little stressed out when things are not going into the right box. When things that we want to happen are not happening, it stresses us out. And when things are happening which we don't want to happen, it stresses us out. So our life is really just a continual battle with what is actually, with being itself. It's a continual battle with being itself. And so one of the greatest gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to the Messenger ﷺ is to be able to know how to deal with being itself. You can't deal with something until you know what it is. What would you call the act of dealing with something while not knowing what it is? What would you call that? Yeah, you call it ignorance. So a lot of people, what we do is, for example, we get onto the religion thing because that's what you're supposed to do. And we'll get onto the job thing because that's what you're supposed to do. And we'll get onto the children having kids, getting married thing because that's what you're supposed to do. And we'll live our lives doing what we're supposed to do. But we never really consider what we are. We never really consider what we are until our nafs start to get kind of upset about what things are, or where things are going or where things are not going. But until that point, we don't really take much time to consider being itself. We exist all the time, but we have no idea about being. Being is the only thing we do on a steady basis. It's just existing, but we have no idea about it. And what's more important is that we don't even ask questions about it. And what's even more important than that is that we don't like to be asked questions about it. We just want to do it and get it over with. But at the end of the day, it's always about what is and what isn't. And when the messengers, when they came, the first thing that they're going to deal with us, the first thing they're going to give with us is to teach us the understanding about being. Now that understanding about being is not necessarily a rational one, even though it has points that can be reasonable. And it's not necessarily a super rational concept. As a matter of fact, that knowledge and that understanding is above concept. It's beyond mind. It's something that you and I understood before you and I even came into this world. Isn't it true? When Allah, as we said many times before, when Allah asked us, "Am I not your Lord?" what do you think we answered Him with? No, but I mean, what instrument did we answer Him with? We didn't have a body to say Bala with. Yeah, it was a soul. So that soul has an understanding that you and I have just kind of lost contact with. So isn't it odd that we come to like dhikr gatherings, or we come to kind of like dini type gatherings? We come with our minds programmed in a certain way that we only understand information, we only know things in a certain kind of way, which is not even in line with what we've known before we came into this world. But we're so detached from that understanding that we don't even know how to approach what it is that the Prophet peace upon him is bringing us, except with a mind that's been educated with 2 and 2 is 4. But there's something that's before that. There's an intuition that's before that is geared towards being. It's geared towards understanding exactly what the nature of what existence actually is like. Because at the end of the day, Allah is in such a way that is not given to non-being. God exists in such a way that it's not a mere possibility. God's existence is not a mere possibility. God's existence is certainly not an impossibility, but God's existence is necessary. It must be. Now that being that must be is the only being that really has any true being. It's the only being, because everything in the universe that has possible being, which is you and I, are looking towards that thing to give us being. We don't supply it ourselves. So again, the Messenger of Islam, what is he doing? The first thing he's teaching us to do is to realign ourselves towards what is actually going on. But the question is, we're not even asking ourselves that question. We just want to know what you have to do to get to paradise, what you have to do to stay out of hell. We just want to know what point, how do you get points for this, We want to go to God like businessmen on the Day of Judgment. But that's not what He made us for. Now, what He made us for is even more interesting. He made us, in fact, to take on being. How does one take on this being? How does one take on this kind of... How does one take on the nature of what actually is? It's through knowledge. And knowledge, true knowledge, is something that when it comes into your life, when you know things as they actually are, and more importantly, when you know Allah as He actually is, it's transformative, because the nature of knowledge is that you literally take it on. It becomes part of you. It becomes who you are. You are what you know. So that's why the Prophet said, "Takhalluq bi akhlaqillah." He said, take on the attributes of God. First of all, how do you do that? It's through knowledge. The more you know Him, the more His character becomes your character. Isn't it true that we say he's a very merciful person, he's a very giving person, he's a very nurturing person, look how he's giving, look at his wahhabiyya, look at how he gives things, look at his karam, look at his generosity. Aren't these Allah's names? So a goodly character, then, taking on the goodly attributes, is through knowledge. The more you know Him, the more you have takhalluq, the more you gain His attributes. But in other words, the more they come into your life. In other words, what happens is that the more you access actual being. Now, what does that mean to me in my daily life? Well, it's very clear to every single one of us in this room, and every single person who says La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, it's very clear as to what Allah is not. But at what point am I going to know what He is? It's very clear to say what Allah is not. Allah is not this, Allah is not that, Allah is not this, Allah is not that. But the question is, when are you going to start, this is like a pessimistic life. When are you going to live an optimist life? When will you begin to recognize what He is? When do you and I begin to recognize what actual being is? No wonder we're depressed. When you put your focus on things that are essentially nothing. When you put your feelings and your devotion and your trust and your energies and things that are themselves and essentially nothing, what can nothing give you? Nothing gives you nothing. If you weren't depressed about that, something's wrong with you. But that's what the spiritual path is about. The spiritual path is about literally taking on these attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through knowledge. The fulfillment of good character. This is called Muhammadur Rasulullah. The most essential attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He has being. And so by knowing Him and by drawing close to Him through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what happens is that you actually start to have real being in your life. What can everything give you? Everything. What can nothing give you? Nothing. So that's the choice. Having dhikr and being in this tariqah party and all that kind of stuff is not so that you can just, compete and argue with people in other turuq about who has the better tariqah. It's not about being able to, have access to the coolest beads. It's not about, being able to do cool trips, safaris to Africa and, checking out it's not about being Mr. Exotic and seeing, all different kinds of people and meeting different kinds of people and then coming back to, brag about the stories. It's not, no, what is dhikr about? Dhikr is about getting up early in the morning and facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dhikr is about getting up early in the morning and facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with what? Not with your effort, it's facing Him wanting to know more. Getting up early in the morning and saying, Allah, I want to know more. I want to know about You. I want to know about this. I want to know about what actually is. But I know none of this has anything. I'm over here trying to figure out where to put things in my box. I got these two boxes, what is and what isn't, and I'm realizing that all of this goes into the isn't box. Because it sure isn't satisfying me. I grab onto this thing, tears. Eventually it's tears. I grab onto that thing, eventually it's tears. I have this aspiration, eventually it's tears. Or I get it and I realize it's nothing. Allah, this is nothing but a mirage. Allah, here's my situation. I know that I'm constant in this. And I'm constantly dealing with this. Yet everything is annihilating and vanishing from me. And I'm the only thing constant going through all of this. Now my consistency and what makes me constant is dependent upon your consistency. So you must be more constant even than I am. And that's the beginning of trust. That you realize God's superiority over you, His being over you, and acknowledging your inability and your lack of real, true being before Him, and stepping towards Him with that weakness and that brokenness, so that Allah can fill you up with Himself. And that's why He said in this famous hadith that the heavens cannot contain me and the earth cannot contain me, but the heart of my believing slave can contain me. And there's a huge secret in that. The heart of my believing slave can contain me. So if you own a house somewhere on some very valuable land, and you live in a very nice neighborhood with very valuable land, and you own a house, and some vagrant, some broke down vagrant wants to move into your house that you own, that's pristine, what are you going to do with that vagrant? Are you going to appreciate their coming into your house, or are you going to be upset with that? Let me know, because I want to know what. What do you think? If you have some vagrant coming into that house, just like a person that's totally given up on their lives and wants you to give up on your life, and just a kind of person that has no ambition, a total low life, does not deserve to live in the neighborhood, to deserve to live in the house, or to deserve to sit on the nice furniture you have in the house, or to even walk, they won't even take their shoes off in the house. You're not necessarily in that house, but you own it. What will you do? You send the authorities over as fast as possible, and you're coming right after them to make sure that person gets out of the house. Why do you think it is every time we try to put something inside of our heart that's not supposed to be there, because it's Allah's house, that we get all that kind of stuff happening to us? Why do you think Allah? Why do we feel the way we do? Because we're putting things that don't belong there. Now that's for someone who doesn't even live in the house. But what about the one who lives in the? What about the one whom the house was built for? He never leaves that house, and you keep throwing things on top of him. That's the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's proximity to us. He said that in the Quran, He mentions that He يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرِّ وَقَلْبِ. Allah mentions in the Quran that He intervenes between a man and his heart. He intervenes between a person and their heart. Now a person is their self. In other words, He intervenes between the nafs and the qalb. If you know anything about these kind of metaphysical issues, you know that the nafs and the qalb are the same thing. How does Allah intervene between the same thing? Because He's more present than that thing itself. Allah is more real, His being is more real, His presence is more present than our presence. So when trying to find something real and trying to find something tangible, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with my wealth? What am I going to do with myself? All of those are signs pointing to the fact that the question that needs to be asked is, why do you even exist? And who do you exist for? And what is your goal? Because if Allah is that goal and Allah is the reason why you exist, these questions will not come up to you. The questions that will come up to you will be, oh my God, I have so much I need to do. How am I going to have the time? My life is running. It's like sand going through the hourglass. I can't seem to keep up. I cannot do enough. Oh Allah, oh Allah. So if we feel these kinds of sensations, we feel depression, or we feel emptiness, or we feel that our life is meaningless, that we're going nowhere. All of those are signs to let you know that you have let a vagrant in the house. You've let a vagrant in the house, and Allah is letting you know. How do you kick the vagrant out of the house? You say La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Until he hates that. That vagrant hates La ilaha illallah. His name is Shaitan. La'nallah alayh. May Allah give us tawfiq. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون. السلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين.